In the morning, he excused himself and stepped into another room, closing the door behind him. What happened afterward remains one of the most discussed moments in recent Chinese pop culture memory. To understand the weight of that night, one must step backward through time. Yu Menglong was born in June 1988 in Urumqi, Xinjiang, far from the glittering lights that would later define his life. Those who knew him as a child often recalled a boy who watched more than he spoke. He had an instinct for rhythm, an ear for quiet melodies, and a fascination with how expressions could tell stories words could not. In school, he was not the loudest or the most outgoing, yet teachers noticed his precision, his ability to focus on a single line of a poem or a frame of film until it felt perfect. In his late teens, he left home to study directing at the Beijing Film Academy, one of the country's most competitive creative institutions. It was there he learned the discipline of cinema, the mathematics of light and shadow, and the unspoken etiquette of a profession where patience often outweighs talent. He first appeared on Chinese television in 2007 in a variety show competition that highlighted emerging singers. He didn't win, but his calm stage presence set him apart. Viewers described him as the contestant who looked like he belonged to another time. 3 years later, he returned in another televised contest, and again captured attention not for flamboyance, but for control, the quiet conviction that the spotlight would eventually find him. It took several years of silence before it did. During that period, Yu Menglong worked behind the camera directing short music videos and learning editing techniques. He was fascinated by pacing, by how emotion could be shaped through the distance between one cut and the next. Those close to him later said that even when he was exhausted, he insisted on staying until every frame looked right. That perfectionism would define his career and, some suspect, play a role in his struggles. In 2015, a web series titled Go Princess Go exploded online and changed everything. Yu Menglong's portrayal of the ninth prince combined restraint with magnetism. The show, unconventional for its time, became a streaming sensation. Viewers filled forums with messages describing his performance as both regal and human. Overnight, he went from a name in the credits to one of the most discussed faces in Chinese drama. He followed it with music releases, including his first album, Toy, whose understated lyrics hinted at a man measuring the cost of fame. Listeners were drawn to the vulnerability in his voice, gentle, careful, almost apologetic. 2 years later came Eternal Love, known internationally as 10 Miles of Peach Blossoms. Playing Bai Zhen, Yu Menglong achieved a new level of recognition. His scenes radiated tranquility and melancholy. Critics noted that he rarely needed dialogue to convey feeling. A glance or a breath did the work. Fans across Asia began calling him the Quiet Prince. Interviews multiplied, endorsements followed, and filming schedules stretched without pause. Those who met him privately described a man who carried an invisible timetable in his head, always polite, never late, seldom truly relaxed. In public, he appeared composed, but his social media posts hinted at fatigue. Photographs of trees, empty roads, and calm rivers began replacing promotional images. When asked about them, he said he found peace in stillness, that nature reminded him of balance. He rarely discussed personal matters. Even his friends said they couldn't always tell when he was tired or merely thoughtful. By 2023, his workload had reached a peak. He was filming dramas back-to-back while recording new songs and appearing in variety programs. Observers noticed he had grown thinner, though he insisted in interviews that he was healthy. He spoke often about discipline and patience. Pressure, he once said, is like wind. You can't stop it, but you can learn to face it without falling. Then, on a quiet morning in September 2025, news spread across every major platform. Yu Menglong had died suddenly in Beijing. Official statements from authorities described the death as accidental, citing no sign of foul play. His management released a brief message expressing shock and asking the public to allow his family privacy. Within hours, millions of fans began posting tributes, videos, and artwork. Hashtags bearing his name trended worldwide. The entertainment industry froze in collective disbelief. Among the earliest to speak publicly was actress Yang Mi, his Eternal Love co-star. Through her studio's verified page, she wrote a short message that fans later described as both tender and haunting. He brought calm to every set, even when the lights were harsh and the hours endless. Some people shine quietly. You don't realize how much their light meant until it's gone. Within minutes, the post began to spread. Major media outlets quoted her words in headlines, and fans reposted them beside stills of the two standing together beneath the peach blossom trees that had defined their most famous scenes. Comment sections filled with candle emojis and lines from the series that suddenly felt prophetic. A day later, reporters noted that Yang had canceled all her public appearances for the week. At the memorial held in Beijing, she arrived quietly, dressed in muted tones, placing a single white flower near his photograph before stepping back. Cameras caught only a glimpse of her face, but that image circulated everywhere, a silent gesture that captured what many felt but couldn't express. Her tribute became one of the most shared messages of the week, not because of its length but because of its simplicity, an honest farewell from one artist to another who had understood silence the same way she did. It deepened the collective sense of loss, turning grief into something shared, almost communal, across the screens of millions who had watched their stories together. The days that followed were filled with sorrow and questions. The confirmed information was limited, and that scarcity became the soil for speculation. Online communities began dissecting timelines, searching for patterns in his final posts, analyzing the tone of his last interviews. Some users claimed the surveillance cameras near the building had gaps in their recordings. Others debated whether he had seemed troubled in recent months. None of these claims were verified, yet they multiplied rapidly, each new theory feeding the next. A particularly widespread discussion centered on a screenshot circulating on social media that supposedly contained a final message attributed to him. Authorities never confirmed its authenticity, and experts pointed out how easily digital images can be altered. Still, the line, if it was ever real, became part of the collective narrative surrounding his death. It was shared thousands of times, often accompanied by photos of him smiling, the contrast sharpening the mystery. Fan theories ranged from the philosophical to the conspiratorial. Some speculated that exhaustion and emotional strain from relentless work schedules might have contributed to a tragic accident. Others, more skeptical of official explanations, suggested that he might have been under pressure related to private matters, though no evidence supported these ideas. A smaller, louder group constructed elaborate online stories linking his death to disputes in the industry. These remained purely speculative, unsupported by verifiable facts. Each thread, however, spoke to the same human impulse, to search for meaning in the sudden loss of someone who seemed too composed, too serene, to disappear so abruptly. Journalists who tried to trace the final hours of his life encountered closed doors and polite refusals. Police statements were brief and consistent. His colleagues attended a private memorial held in Beijing a week later. Those who spoke publicly emphasized his professionalism and warmth. One director described him as the rare actor who listens more than he talks. Another said, he could express emotion in silence better than most could with lines. As the weeks passed, attention shifted from the circumstances of his death to the legacy of his work. Streams of eternal love surged again. Clips from his early interviews circulated with captions calling him the soul of an era of web dramas. Critics re-examined his performances, noting a through line of empathy, how he portrayed even fantastical characters with grounded emotion. Scholars of modern Chinese media began citing him as a symbol of the country's digital age stardom, an artist who bridged the world of early online dramas and the mainstream prestige productions that followed. Meanwhile, fan communities continued to investigate on their own. They compared filming schedules, social media timestamps, and interviews in pursuit of closure. Despite the volume of discussion, no credible evidence ever emerged contradicting the official conclusion of accidental death. Over time, many fans redirected their energy towards celebrating his life rather than decoding it. Annual online vigils began forming, where admirers would share his songs and favorite quotes. The comments under his old posts filled with messages like, "We still see your light," and "You taught us calm." In retrospect, Yu Menglong's story reads as both triumph and caution. It illustrates how fame can lift an artist beyond anonymity, but also isolate him inside expectation. He entered the industry as a quiet dreamer and left as a symbol whose silence invited 1,000 interpretations. The persistence of speculation around his passing reflects less about hidden truths and more about the collective difficulty of accepting randomness in tragedy. Today, his work continues to appear in retrospectives and streaming recommendations. Young actors cite him as an influence.
Directors speak of his discipline.
Audiences rewatch his scenes not merely to admire his beauty or talent, but to look for clues, tiny gestures, lingering expressions that might hint at the thoughts he never shared. Yet, as the narrator of any good documentary might observe, the search for answers often reveals more about those who look than about the subject himself. In the end, what remains are the images: a prince standing beneath cherry blossoms, a singer quietly strumming a guitar, a man gazing through a studio window at the rising sun. Each frame holds the same gentle mystery that defined him in life. Whether or not the full truth of that final night is ever understood, Yu Menglong's impact endures, in the performances that continue to move audiences, in the songs that echo with soft melancholy, and in the reminder that even the brightest stars can leave questions no investigation can fully resolve.